is no stranger to the rodeo world. A beautiful gal, that a pickup woman in her own right, was inducted in here last year. We all know her, watched her grow up, and cleaning arenas and barrel racing and breakaway roping and just being one of Johnny's left-hand cowboys. And that's what she was. Roxy comes from a ranching and rodeo family. She grew up on the back of a horse, helping her granddad John and Johnny Holloway doing anything that needed to be done on the ranch. Roxy competed in 4-H, Little Britches, high school, intercollegiate, and amateur rodeos. Roxy became her dad's pickup woman, when the one hired didn't show up at a rodeo. That happened to be my cousin. Roxy went on to pick up for 25 years for Holloway Rodeos and many other contractors, being the only woman ever selected to pick up at the World Finals Rodeo in El Paso, Texas in 1988. Roxy is proud and honored to have been an honoree last year at the Casey Tibbs Tribute. Roxy currently works as a business teacher at the Cheyenne Eagle Butte High School. She grew up listening to Dick Ward announce at all their rodeos. She is so proud now to speak on his behalf, as the Ward boys are like big brothers to her. Welcome, Roxy Holloway.
By a show of hands here tonight, how many of you all ever heard Dick Ward announce a rodeo? Woo! Quite a few. And for those of you that didn't, you don't know what you missed. Anyone that ever had the honor of hearing Dick Ward announce a rodeo knows what a privilege it was, and that he truly was the very best. Nothing against any of you other rodeo announcers in here. That's just my opinion. As they say, the announcer can make or break the rodeo. He certainly made it. Dick began his announcing career at the Timberlake Arena for the Saddle Club Field Day in 1959. Dick donated his announcing talent to many 4-H, high school, and community area rodeos throughout his career. In fact, one year he announced the SDRA finals free of charge because the South Dakota Rodeo Association was in a financial bind and didn't have money to pay him. Nowadays, that is unheard of because everyone has to be paid to do anything. It just goes to show how much Dick Ward enjoyed announcing, and that he was there for the rodeo associations, the rodeo committees, and for the cowboys, not for the money. Dick was born in Fort Yates, North Dakota, the son of Buck and Florence LeCompte Ward in 1931. He grew up on a family ranch 14 miles northwest of Timberlake and attended school at Pure Indian Learning Center, Wakfala, and Fort Yates, North Dakota. Did I say that right, Cater? He dropped out of school during his freshman year of high school, shortly after his dad passed away, to help his mother make a living and raise his siblings. Dick proudly served his country in the United States Marines from 1952 to 1954 during the Korean conflict. On August 28, 1957, Dick married Dolores Ducheneau. Then in August of 1958, their first of 4 sons was born. He was named Tater. Then came Todd, Troy, and Marty, or as Dick sometimes referred to them, Adolf, Rudolph, get off, and stay off. Dick worked as a ranch hand for many years, including a long time at the Lawrence Long Ranch, south of Timberlake. He then worked for Herb Bader for many years. Herb owned the sale barn in Timberlake, and that is where Dick's good rope horse Whiz came from. And it's nice to say that tonight, 2 of Herb's son and daughter, his only kids, Butch and Susie Bader, are both here tonight for Dick and Tater and family. Dick also worked for the Western Cattle Company for 3 years before it became the VE Grazing Association. Dick and his family lived in Eagle Butte for 9 years while Dick worked as a maintenance man for the Cheyenne River Housing Authority. He then became manager of the CRST beef camp near Whitehorse for several years. And in 1974, Dick and Dolores moved with the 4 boys to a ranch 4.5 miles west of Whitehorse, where they started the We 6 Ranch. We 6 stood for Dick and Dolores and the 4 boys. Tater has the We 6 brand yet today. Dick was happiest when he was at a rodeo. It didn't matter if he was announcing, cheering on his 4 boys, or competing himself. He loved rodeo. During Dick's days of competing, he collected many honors and awards from the South Dakota Rodeo Association, including runner-up calf roper in 1963, runner-up team roper in 1969 and 70 with his partner Keith Annis, and in 1976 he was Rodeo Announcer of the Year and was awarded a beautiful saddle. He also received a plaque from the McLaughlin Rodeo Association in 1987. In one of Dick's hardest times of rodeo announcing, and he almost quit, was at the McLaughlin Rodeo, since I'm talking about McLaughlin. In 1969, a bull rider by the name of Ronnie Jones was stepped on by a bull and ended his life there in the arena at McLaughlin. I was too young to remember, but I was told by my dad and several others how Dick kept the crowd entertained and kept talking and talking while the EMTs were taking care of Ronnie. So what an honor that was to have him there to keep the crowd entertained and keep their mind off of what was going on. He was truly a good rodeo announcer. But of all the awards Dick received, none of them were as important to him as the trophies, buckles, saddles, and titles that his 4 sons accumulated in their respective events. So I have a little story about each one of his sons. It's hell to get old, now I gotta use these. So Tater was telling me a story about Todd, Troy, and Marty, and I was trying to get them to tell me a story about Tater. So finally Troy comes and tells me the same story that Tater told me about Troy, but he switched the name on it. So here it goes. So Janelle and Todd had just been married, and Todd was entered into bulldogging in McLaughlin, and Todd rode in a roping box, or the box anyway, he was into bulldogging. And Dick introduced Todd, and he said, "This is my son." He said, "He's probably the only kid that you'll see that's got frostbit ears year-round. That's from having his head in the fridge all the time." So now I know why they call him Todd Wad with a Kamad Bod. Troy called his dad one time. He had a good horse drawn at a pro rodeo somewhere, telling his dad he's got the best horse drawn and all he has to do is do his job and he'll win it. "But Dad, I'm a little short on cash. Is there any way you'll pay my fees for me for half?" So Dick said, "Well, what's half of nothing?" All Tater could tell me about Marty was, "I don't have any stories because Marty always just stayed in the house." And then finally I got one on Tater. So I don't know how many of you know that Tater was a stuntman in the movie Dances with Wolves. Anyway, he did a darn good job, and pretty soon, a few years later, there's another movie that came out, and Tater's phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing. They were wanting him to be the main stuntman in that movie. It was called Brokeback Mountain. South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Iowa. With his quick wit and knowledge about rodeo events, Dick knew most of the contestants and their families, which added so much. He could present a visualization of the arena happenings like no other. He had his own seasoned jokes and personal comments, making sure there was never a dull moment. He definitely had the perfect rodeo voice. He could talk it because he could do it. I basically grew up in the rodeo arena on the back of a horse, and I remember Dick Ward being the announcer at all of the Holloway rodeos. He announced his first rodeo for my granddad, John Holloway, at the Brisky Lake Arena in 1960. And he announced his final time for my dad, Johnny, at the Holloway Bucking Horse Sale in May of 1994. I got a couple funny stories about Dick. One year, Dick called and asked Dad if he could come haul some cows for him, so my folks jumped in a semi trailer and went down, and they got there. Mom jumped out of the semi and was going to guide Dad back to the unloading chute. All of a sudden, I guess she was dancing around and jumping around, biting and itching and stinging and whatnot. Well, she didn't realize it, but she was standing on top of an ant pile. And she went running for the house, trying to undo her pants and get them down and get them off because there was a bunch of ants in there. Anyway, when she finally got them all shook out or whatever, and she come back down there to the corrals, Dick said, "I've had a few women come to my house and take their pants down, but this is the first time I ever had one take them down while she was running to the house." Another story, one year at the fall fair there in Eagle there was a family, the Blue Coat family, always followed Dick everywhere. They just loved his announce and loved to hear him, so they went to all the rodeos that Dick announced. Anyway, that day it was real foggy, real thick fog that morning, and the slack was going on there at the fair, and anyway, finally it kind of started to lift, and the sun kind of came through the fog there, and Dick looked up and he said, and there was the Blue Coat family, 4 or 5 of them sitting there all huddled up with blankets, and he said, "Oh heck, that's the Blue Coat family." For a second I thought it was gorillas in the mist. Now to go back in time, I'll share with you some of Dick's favorite sayings from rodeos past. So the grand entry would be ready to come in the arena, and usually it was my dad carrying the American flag, and Dick would say, "Johnny, lead them on in if you would please, lead them on in." After the grand entry would come in the arena and stop, Dick would introduce all the help, from the secretaries and timers to the judges and pickup men. And I always liked how he introduced the judges. He'd say, "Our 2 cowboy judges here today, picked for their honesty and integrity to judge a bucking horse and a bucking horse rider, are Joe Blow and John Doe," or whoever it was. I mean, just the way he introduced them was just, I thought that was awesome. Then he would say, tell the pickup men, "Post the colors if you would please, post the colors." And as they were posting the colors, he'd say, just kind of what you heard tonight, "At any organized gathering throughout this little free United States of ours, it is only customary to give some sort of thanks, some sort of prayer to the good Lord, that our country is still a free country, that old glory is still a-waving, and long may she wave." And then he'd say, "This is more or less of a cowboy's gathering. I see it only fitting and proper, that if you'll all stand and remove your cover, I'll recite to you my version of the cowboy's prayer," which you heard earlier when they played. And in my mind, there will never be a cowboy's prayer that will top his. After he finished his prayer, he'd say, "Now, Johnny, if you'll peel off with Old Glory and lead our grand entry from the arena, we'll move right down to the first section of bareback riding." He always kept the rodeo moving and very smoothly. If it seemed like a contestant was taking a little too long in the bucking chute, he'd always say, "Let's go, cowboy, anyone can ride him in there. Get him out in the big pen and let's see what you can do." When the gate opened, he'd say, "Now go on with him, cowboy. Rear back and chop at him." Once the ride was over, he'd always tell the crowd, "Now let him hear from your side of the fence." I remember these so much, even though I was little growing up. I remember them like it was yesterday. And one of my favorites that he always said, if we happened to have a horse, seemed like every rodeo we went to, somebody would bring a horse in and say, "I got a bucking horse, I got a bucking horse," like an old spoiled saddle horse or whatever. So Dad would put him in the draw, and we wouldn't have a name for him, so Dick would always say, "Well, we'll just call him Old Toilet Paper and watch him wipe it up." At a wild horse roundup in Timber Lake, Uncle Casey was there, Uncle Casey Tibbs. he said to my dad, "What is this guy doing hanging around here?" He said, "I've traveled all over the world, and Dick is the best announcer I've ever heard." He said he's better than the best. So in closing, I want to close in Dick Ward's words, as he closed every rodeo that he ever announced. And this is what he would say: "As you leave here tonight, watch out for the car behind the one in front of you, because that's you, partner. And we here at the Casey Tibbs Center have taken a liking to you and want to see you back again next year. Thank you."
Good job, Roxy. Let's welcome to receive the Dick Ward honoree for going into the 2023 Casey Tibbs Hall of Fame, Mr. Tater Ward. Tater, why don't you come up? And all the rest, yeah, Troy, Todd, get up here. They want you up. Marty, we want you up here. While they're waiting for these guys to get up here, and I just want to add this, that I was blessed to be a school teacher's kid. And not only do we commemorate Dick, these guys had one of the most wonderful mothers that anybody could want. Tater was a senior in high school when we lost Dolores to cancer and on down the line. She was so proud of Dick. And one time at a teacher's conference, Dolores pulled that buckle out in 1976 of him winning the STRA Getting Announcer of the Year. And then she said to my mother exactly this: "Dolores, she was a good mother, supported teachers. She said, if Todd gets out of line, kick him in the ass." True story. Here's Tater.
Thank you, Jim. I wasn't going to tell anything, but Roxy said, "Better tell a story or two," and she lies a little bit about that. But growing up, just like any other rodeo family, you know, we was at rodeos every weekend, and Dad and Mom had 4 wild boys growing up, and we was always climbing up on something, and that's probably why our Uncle Bill, he dubbed us curtain crawlers and house apes. I think he's referred to these 3 back here. But we had no choice but to drag us around. We probably couldn't find anybody to watch us. So he took us along and was send us up on top of the crow's nest to set his horns or speakers, or climb up a REA pole to set his speakers. But reflecting back, them were good times, and where through Dad's announcing gigs, we met a lot of good people who made lifetime friendships. A little bit about Wiz. Roxy touched on that a little bit, but Wiz was a little short horse, had a ringtail on him. The faster he rung it, the faster he went. And Dad used him for calf roping, dogging, tied on team roping on both ends. He was good, picked up on him. We used him in the 4-H Little Richard's rodeos, local events, anything we went to. He's just a good horse, and he's buried on top of at the Eagle Butte Rodeo Grounds, just straight west of the rope and dogging chutes. When he died, dug a hole up there and buried him up on top of the hill up there. And speaking of the rodeo grounds there at Eagle Butte, in 1994, former United States President Jimmy Carter was attending the CRST Fair and Rodeo, and Randy Taylor was announcer. And he had heard that Jimmy Carter was up in the grandstands, and so he was horseback out in the arena, and he rode up and seen Dad sitting there, and he said, "There ain't no better person to introduce the President of the United States than Dick Ward." And he handed the mic over to Dad, and Dad jumped up and introduced President Jimmy Carter. But Dad was strict. Of course, 4 boys, you know, he kind of had to be, and like any father back in them days. But some of his strictness, he'd throw in a funny word, and you didn't know whether to laugh or hold a straight face. So this ain't a rodeo-related story, but everybody said you got to tell the deer story. So one winter, I wanted to go to the dance up in Eagle Butte. I was still in high school, and so it took me about a half a day to convince him to go, and the other half to take that brand new pickup that him and Mom had just bought. So I got the whole lecture about don't do this and don't do that, you know. And the last thing he said when I walked out that door, he said, "Don't wreck that pickup." So I went on up to the dance and had a good time. Got ready to leave, and I was in the dance, a fresh blanket of snow come down. It was icy out anyway, and got ready to leave and come up on this green pickup. And he was at a stoplight, and I come behind him and pushed on the brakes. And I went to sliding. The faster I stepped on the brakes, the faster I went to sliding. Pretty soon I ran right in the back of that green pickup. He had a big old heavy duty bumper on the back there, and of course it scuffed up his green tailgate. Well, I hated to go home. They just put a kink in the bumper and took out the plastic grill, crunched that hood up pretty good. You could check the oil without even opening the hood. So I went on home, went to bed, and we had beds down there in the basement. It was like a dormitory down there. And every morning when Dad would get up, well, he'd sit there and drink coffee, and when it's time for us to get up, and we thought we should get up, he'd stomp on the floor. "Boys, get up!" Well, that morning it was, "Tater, get up!" Well, I hated to come up them steps, and I always remember there were 12 steps coming up there. I got dressed, and every time I took a step, I'd tell myself in my mind, "Tell him the truth, tell him the truth." So I got to top them steps, and there he was sitting out there looking at his pitiful looking pickup. He said, "What the hell happened out there?" So I don't know where "tell me the truth" went. It must stay on the steps. I said, "I hit a deer over there by Dutree's place." He said, "Did you kill it?" And I thought real fast. I could do that back then. I said, "No, but I broke a leg on it. I seen it hobbling down through the ditch, out in the pasture." He bit his lip. He said, "Get in there and get something to eat. Get washed up, get something to eat." So he went down to his bringing horses or whatever, and I was visiting with Mom and eating. And I knew I was in for a long, tough day. Very soon he come up from the barn. He's checking that pickup out. And he come hustling up to the house, and he opened the door and he said, "So you hit a deer, huh?" So I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that blankety blank must have been a John Deere." He said, "There's green paint all over it." Dad's love for rodeo was passed on to Mom and us 4 boys, and we tried to push it on to our kids, and it is truly a great sport. And I'd like to thank Roxy for all the good words, a lot of them, but what you said about me, and for doing such a great story for Dad. And thank you to the Tibbs Foundation for honoring him and recognizing him, and congratulations to all the other honorees. And one of Dad's sayings was, he's got a smile on his face like a wave on a slop bucket. And Dad's probably got one of them right now. Thank you.